Do you want to save some serious money? Learn how a simple gadget can double your gas mileage while creating less pollution. The simple gadget does all of this while giving your car more power and longer engine life. Learn more with the link below.
Well, you have 4 different areas of power structures that you've identified. The Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, and it might represent a whole area. You have the P2 Lodge of Freemasons and the Vatican together. You have the British European royalty, and then you have the Khazarian mafia. Now, when you look at all of those 4 pillars of power, do they all work together? Or are they working together now and they usually fight? Or what do you see of those 4 pillars of power?
Well, I wouldn't regard myself as the best authority, but I would say that the best understanding I have is that they work together when it is to their advantage to do so, when they feel they're compelled to do so in order to protect their own interests or advance their own interests. When they have their separate objectives, then they go their own way. But yes, I believe they do work together, and they work in controlling nations in such a way as to either cause conflicts or avoid them. All sorts of direct and indirect actions, but doing so with tremendous amounts of financial resources, so that they have tentacles, and they try to have tentacles in every government everywhere. There certainly has been reports, for example, that the Vatican provides large personal checking accounts to the elected executive heads of every nation, including the United States, and simply provide the president this. I wouldn't want to say the amounts, but they're very large amounts of checking accounts, and it's just provided for their friendship. We'll put it that way.
So they'll give them billions of dollars just to bribe them.
Just to be available to do the things that they wish done in certain respects as they make a friendly request.
So they will come out very, very wealthy after they're done being president.
Well, it seems to have been the case in the past. I believe there may likely be in the future, there may very well be charges in that nature. I can't say. There are plenty of other crimes other than that. That's only one.
Well, all of these pillars of power have been accused of being heavily involved in child trafficking. Every single one of them. Is that what your research has pointed to as well?
The information I have is that is entirely true, and it is. It's absolutely shocking. I mean, shocking is an entirely inadequate word to describe it, and it is crimes of a nature that need to be stopped and repelled and punished severely as soon as possible in every respect. So many people have already said this, I'm just being repetitive. But it is very much a part of I believe it's very much a part of the sealed indictments. Many people are asking, why are the indictments sealed? If they've got people to indict, why don't they go ahead and prosecute them? They're just leading us along, and so forth and so on. Well, there are good reasons from a law enforcement standpoint in certain types of situations to keep the indictment sealed when you have people of the lower rungs that have been arrested even and charged. It's possible to get good information to lead to people higher up the chain. And it's very important to get adequate information to finally get up to direct information against the highest people. If you do not get the highest people, it's going to continue. All they're going to get is just more of their servants, and they'll go to back to the same practices. We're talking about human trafficking. We're talking about trafficking. It sounds like you're talking about traffic signals. We're talking about selling human beings for all sorts of purposes, both human mistreatment during their lives, for organs after they've been killed, I could go on to other things that
yeah, it's so evil.
Yes.
I mean, word doesn't even describe how evil it is. Evil's not a strong enough word. No, let's talk about, because you've spent quite a bit of time thinking about this. How do we solve this problem? And you talk about that we have to capture and take down the major tools of this elitist power. And I hate the word elitist. I really got to tell you, because that means that they're better than others, or they think they're better. I think they're horrible human beings. Some of them are great, and they just happen to be born into a family, and maybe they're helping to fight. But the ones who are actually doing this evil, how do we take them down and what tools do they have that we need to focus on first?
Well, I think that
you talk about the deep state weapons.
One of the things that I think is very important to focus on in terms of, we'll say, disabling them or disarming them, is to go after their wealth. And the circumstances of that emergency order signed by the president last December 20th, less than a year ago. I mean, we're talking about more or less 9 months that it's been in effect. I think it has been a tremendously powerful tool against the ruling elite, because to the extent we can provide evidence about their activities, that order effectively freezes their assets and can be served against any financial institution, has actually been served against all financial institutions, but it's just a matter of adding the names of the people we have evidence against, and their assets are frozen. That, I think, is a very significant tool. That is the mother lode as far as going after their weapons. If they can't pay for their activities, then their activities are greatly restricted. They have to have the capability of marshaling their forces, and that requires the movement of money of one nature or another. And so I think that is a very important aspect of things. But I feel quite certain that there have been already military actions by our special forces in various places to actually go in and take action against fortified places where they keep their wealth or where they conduct their activities. Now, I can't identify any of those. That would be classified information, I'm quite certain. And so we'll just have to wait and see when that comes to our attention, but I believe it will. And I don't think it's going to be way out there in the future. Again, my belief is that we're going to have important information of the kind in a more specific form before the November elections. But by no means is all the information going to get out before that time.
Well, when you think about it, there's indications that we're taking down their wealth, and you talk about the presidential executive order. You've talked about them taking down their communication power by a couple satellites that have been taken out. Now, the other thing is us having the information, or the good guys having the information. NSA has all that information. Now, are you aware whether NSA has been working to provide that, the good guys have been working to provide that information in a meaningful way to the people who are trying to defeat this?
Well, I think I'm quite convinced that is true. I don't have any doubt. I say that based upon certainly many of the breadcrumbs that have been provided by QAnon And I would just say, in regard to some, there is still a debate, and some people that I think are serious-minded are still asserting that QAnon is a LARP, or whatever you want to call it. In other words, a fake source or somebody just trying to manipulate the masses. That debate is over as far as I'm concerned. I'm convinced that it is a source of information that is highly qualified to deal with and has access to important classified information, but provides breadcrumbs of a nature that themselves are not classified, that can at least be of some benefit to us in understanding what is going on, so that we are not held completely in the dark all the way up to the end of whatever outcome is involved in this confrontation with the ruling elite.
Have you heard about plasma energy and all the amazing healing potential it has? Many have experienced how plasma energy can help your body. Recent university tests have shown the effectiveness of balancing plasma energy and putting your body back into biological balance. Tests have shown success in lab animals and human beings by altering conditions of cancer, AIDS, diabetes, malaria, Ebola, E. coli, high blood pressure, brain issues in adults and children, and many other imbalances in the body. Learn more from Dr. Paul and researcher Lynn Schmaltz and how they are using plasma energy to help people heal. See the link below.
Why do you think Q is secret? Why do you think, because it makes it seem like a conspiracy theory or a LARP because of the way that they're conducting it. Why can't it be done in a way that is a little bit more, that the average person can take it seriously?
I think the answer is that the classification laws are just too broad and protective in order to come out in the open and then have the press down at the Pentagon all the time talking about how much more can you tell us and how can you prove that without doing this or that. You can't just come out and tell people all of these things without getting across or getting into the area of violations of the security laws. And, particularly when our adversaries are not obeying those laws, it's hard to have that kind of a limitation upon your communication. So these are not statements by anyone that are, in effect, complete sentences or affirmative statements or things of that sort. They are matters of suggestion that I think are skillfully designed in such a way that they do not divulge classified information, but they are able to tell us information that is important to our understanding.
Well, after they took QAnon down just recently, is he posting again somewhere else?
QAnon is posting currently, has been actively.
Okay, so when he was taken down...
last day or so, he just had one or two posts, but yes, he is, I say he. Again, I believe that QAnon is one of, I believe, 9 people, and most of them, the 2/3 of them at least, are military intelligence.
Why do you believe it's 9 people?
There have been some indications of that by QAnon and by the people who've studied it closely, and that's their conclusion. And so I have to bow to their judgment. It would need to be something of that nature.
There's a lot of smart people, really smart people who have thought a lot, who are read a lot, are very critical thinkers who believe in QAnon. Well, and so for all the people that think it's a LARP, I'm on the fence. I'm just bringing information forward, but I think there's too many really smart critical thinkers who believe in it for me to just say to dismiss it.
Well, I think there are people who have important interests to disavow it as well. because it infringes upon their ability to influence people in their way of thinking. And so as a result, there's a great motive for others to criticize or to laugh at it or whatever you wish. They can make their own decision. I think it is a great tool of information for me, and one that is unprecedented in terms of its value. So don't get me to apologize for him doing what he's doing.
Well, you have followed some of those breadcrumbs and you're like, oh my God, and learned stuff. So that's why people believe in it, because it's pointed them to new information they didn't know about that they found and uncovered.
Well, yes. And let me just make a point in that regard. I had the discussion, I think you and I had the discussion fairly recently about the document dump that contained the documents showing bank accounts worldwide of the operatives of the deep state, the ones that are connected with our intelligence agencies, but have their own resources of tremendous wealth with which to conduct programs. In other words, the missing $21 trillion that we discussed. I went back because there was some discussion about, well, what amounts are really in those? Is it $1 trillion, or is it 100 trillion, or what? I went back and looked at one particular account and counted the numbers of zeros and get to a trillion, and you're halfway there, and you keep on counting it, and the zeros themselves in that bank account that are certified by a multitude of signatures as being valid amounts to $1 trillion. And then there are three more numbers in advance of that are, I don't remember what those numbers are, but it was, say the minimum was at least one, and that was in the third column. At least one was in the third column before the trillion. So you're talking at very minimum of $100 trillion.
Well, but that's just crazy numbers. I mean, we can't even get our mind around that.
That is exactly what I was saying when we spoke about that before. And so it makes the numbers in our so-called dollar system, our U.S. Federal Reserve note system, whatever you talk about, the Federal Reserve, it makes nonsense of them, or else those accounts are nonsense.
The whole thing makes it seem like nonsense if those accounts have that kind of money in it.
Right. And so we're going to have to get to a point of knowing reality sometime soon. And I hope we're able to do it. And the people on top of all this, I think, certainly have better information than I do. And there are, I think they will be taking the best closely considered actions on these things as we move forward. It's going to take some planning of that nature, careful planning, in order to have anything close to a smooth landing when we're talking about the kind of difficulty that we're facing with our monetary system being only one aspect of it. But people will hope to be able to continue and enjoy their life's situation as we presently have it. I hope everyone is able to do that as well. It seems to me there is a substantial chasm of uncertainty between here and there, but even that is far more attractive, it seems to me, far more optimistic than the circumstance of what was planned by the ruling elite as of 1900.
Absolutely.
That by this time, by the year 2000 and thereafter, they were absolutely stating expressly they wanted to be in the position of knowing how to poison people to get only the number of people left that were necessary and desired to serve them.
Well, we are in a state where 1 out of 2 men now and 1 out of 3 women will have cancer in their lifetime. The autism rates are going off the chart. We are in a pretty sad situation. I didn't know cancer rates were that high. I think it's an alarmist level. And people are not, the mainstream media are sitting on their thumbs.
Very difficult situation even to talk about because so many people are affected by those things. And I hate to affect their thinking in their own circumstances. But it's very troublesome to see the evidence or indications that in the United States, cancer treatment is not intended to be really effective.
Exactly. There's treatments. There's ways to deal with it. There's that cancer video series that's free that's out. I want everyone to see it. There are solutions, but the Senate confirmed, this is in the 1950s, they did a serious study and they confirmed that there's an actual conspiracy to suppress cancer treatment. And to, of course, increase the incidence of cancer. Yes.
Including, I believe I may have mentioned to you once before, there's a very interesting book I read some time ago in which it revealed that there was polio treatment going on, of course, in the 50s and in the 60s, vaccinations for polio, inoculations. And the book I'm speaking about reported that something like 600,000, maybe more, that if anything understates the number of smallpox vaccinations that were given that were contaminated with cancer-causing viruses, particularly soft cell cancers, from monkey viruses. Now, I can understand the possibility that somehow a toxic monkey virus might be in some lab that might infect one dose of smallpox vaccine, or even but 6 million.
Yeah, how do you get it to affect every single one without planning it?
That's correct. That's exactly the point. And so anyway, we can go way into all of these kinds of things and spend unending time on them, but we have tremendous problems of that kind all across our government. It's not just in the matter of defense or things of that sort, but right across the board in terms of our health care. There have been some reports of decreased spraying of the aerosols that put in the metallic particles into the air that are so detrimental. They're shown to attack the human nervous system as well as animals, as well as insects, killing the bees, killing honeybees. Honeybees are being killed by aluminum in the brain, giving them Alzheimer's, you might say, and causing them to be able to find their hives and that sort of thing. Now, this is...
Do they think, and I don't mean to, but how can they be so crazy? Okay, let's say they want to get it down to 500 million people. Don't they think if they destroy the ecosystem that they're going to have to live with it too? Or do they have a plan to rebuild the ecosystem?
Well, that question is often asked. I don't have an answer to it. When you're psychotic, when you're a psychopath, it's very hard to put in logical reasoning about it and whether they've looked out for their own safety or not. Perhaps they have some idea that they've got something underground or in space or something of the sort. I don't know. But I think what we need to do is stop them from doing what they're doing and do so as quickly as possible.
As quickly as possible. Okay, Wayne, can you give a pitch on your book? Because you have this amazing book on, it's an alternative, I shouldn't say it's an alternative, it's a truthful look at history that no one has ever been taught. And it's been so highly recommended by so many people. Can you give a pitch on your book, and then how people can get a hold of that and get to your blog?
Well, I'm happy to do so, of course. This one has a shrink wrap on it, so it looks glossy, but it's protected during the shipping so that it remains in new condition and so forth. But what I did is go back and look at actual facts that mean something to real people in terms of this economic analysis. And I found, to my surprise, Jude Winniski, a man I worked with back 2003, 2005, told me nobody has explained the Great Depression. No economist has done so. All those big, thick books by John Kenneth Galbraith and so forth, he never even assumed to explain the Great Depression. There's one by Rothbard, who's a so-called Austrian school, that explains the Great Depression, but makes it very clear that he explains it only upon the basis of cycles. Now, cycles, I don't relate to. It's something supposedly that they can somehow see repeated in patterns, but he says the Great Depression resulted entirely from cycles and no other specific event or person. What I did is go back into records, particularly the diaries of the Treasury Secretary for Franklin Roosevelt. He kept a personal diary every day, and that was finally edited and published. I went into that and found what actually went on, and they did. And I found the actions that I believe clearly were fully sufficient to make the Great Depression happen. In addition to the three things that they got Herbert Hoover to roll over for while he was president in the 4 previous years, during including 1929. Now, I just say briefly on Hoover, one of the things to know about him is he was not really a Republican. He was not really a Democrat. He had made a fortune in engineering, which may have meant that he had some important elitist connections. I don't know. But one of the things I do know that I found in my research is that in 1920, he wanted to run for vice president on the Democrat ticket with FDR as the front runner, as the presidential candidate. Franklin Roosevelt refused to do that because he knew that what happened during the war and so forth, that the Democrats were very out of favor. And there would have to be a complete change of the public attitude toward Democrats before the Democrats would have a chance again. And so FDR refused to do that at that time. And so Hoover instead went onto the cabinet of the Republican who was elected in 1920.
Well, that's pretty common, though. Politicians will switch parties just to get in office, right? I mean, right. They don't care what party they're in.
I'm just saying it was not a matter of Republican, Democrat. Both were controlled essentially by the ruling elite.
Exactly. And they still are today.
Yes. And so anyway, my book goes through those things even back through the 1800s as to what was going on in the country, and actually how people were much better informed about economics then than they are now.
Yes.
Keynes came along to confuse people and give a really good set of highly subjective ideas about how the economy operates and make everything much more complicated than it really is. And as a result, he was exalted and made the greatest economist of the 20th century. And it's all a ruse. I debunk the Keynesianism in my book, and I think I do it in terms that are understandable to normal people.
Yeah, it's a book unlike any book that's out there, and you will learn something. It's amazing. It really is. We did that long series so people get an idea, but there's so much more in that.
Well, I thank you very much for that, and I'm happy to have any interest about it. But
where can they get it?
My website is the best place to get it because I ship everywhere in the United States without cost. I'm selling it for $25, which is basically break even. I'm happy to have any interest I can. frankly, at this point, I'm getting along to the time of wondering whether I'll have a second edition of it or a second printing of it. I hope to have, but it's important that I'm trying to get it into the mainstream of thinking so that people actually give it some thought, because the academics are uniformly controlled. You practically cannot work for an academic institution and not be a Kabbalist operative. I mean, the people who are given the scholarships to go to Oxford and so forth, it's all for the purpose of indoctrinating those who write history, those who do economics, to be on the side of the cabal. I'm hopeful that that's going to change. So far, it hasn't.
Do they consciously do that?
Well, I don't see why they wouldn't. There are people even inside academics. Anthony Sutton was one, now deceased, who wrote clearly that his experience was, while he was at Stanford, the Hoover Institution there, as a fellow, it was made clear to him, and he wrote about it, that if you say things that you're not supposed to say and you don't make the arguments you're supposed to make, they will break your rice bowl. In other words, you will not be able to make a living. You will not be able to eat.
I think that's true.
And people want to be successful in their occupations, so they find a way to be accommodative of those who decide whether they get a professorship or not. After my book came out, another book came out calling FDR a traitor to his class. He was absolutely not a traitor to his class, which was elitist to the hilt. He was their champion and hero, and one that was trusted so much by them that he was practically given a free rein on how to handle political matters in the U.S. during his 4 times of being elected.
And you go into that in depth in that book. I appreciate this so much for you sticking around and or for doing this interview with us. Will you stick around and do a little segment for my Patreons?
If you have something to speak about, I'll be happy to do so. Thank you.